Part 1. The air inside La Lumiere was thick with the scent of truffle oil and aged wine, the kind of place where every detail screamed opulence. Crystal chandeliers casting prisms across white linen tables, gold-rimmed plates gleaming under soft light, and the low hum of conversations that carried the weight of power and privilege. Marcus Kane stepped through the double doors, his tailored Brioni suit fitting him like a second skin, his presence commanding the room without effort. At 42, he was a man who had built an empire from nothing, a tech mogul whose name was synonymous with innovation and wealth. His sharp green eyes scanned the restaurant, taking in the familiar faces of CEOs, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. He was here to meet a potential investor, but as he followed the maitre d' to his reserved table, something, or rather, someone, caught his eye. She was moving between tables, a tray balanced expertly in one hand, her movements graceful but hurried, the kind of efficiency born from years of practice. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her uniform, though crisp, couldn't hide the fatigue in her posture. Marcus froze mid-step, his polished Oxford shoes scuffing the marble floor. It couldn't be. Not here. Not like this. Lila. The name slipped from his lips before he could stop it, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 20 years. The waitress turned, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment, time collapsed. Those hazel eyes, flecked with gold, were unmistakable. Lila Harper. His best friend from high school, the girl who'd shared his dreams, his secrets, his laughter. The girl who'd vanished from his life without a trace after graduation. She blinked, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to shock, then something softer, recognition, maybe even regret. Marcus. Her voice was quiet, almost drowned out by the clink of glasses and murmured conversations, but it hit him like a freight train. She set the tray down on a nearby stand, her hands trembling slightly. What are you doing here? The maitre d' hovered awkwardly, sensing the tension, but Marcus waved him off. I could ask you the same thing, he said, his tone light but his eyes searching her face for answers. She looked older, of course, lines etched around her eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there when they were 17, but she was still Lila, still the girl who could make him laugh until his sides hurt, who'd once convinced him to sneak into the school's chemistry lab at midnight to borrow supplies for a prank. I work here, she said simply, gesturing to her uniform as if it explained everything. But it didn't. Not to Marcus. Not when he remembered the Lila who'd dreamed of becoming a journalist, who'd scribbled stories in the margins of her textbooks, who'd sworn she'd see the world and write about it. How had she ended up here, serving overpriced wine to people like him? He wanted to ask, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he said, can we talk? After your shift. She hesitated, glancing at the bustling dining room. I'm on until 10. It's busy tonight. I'll wait, he said, and there was a finality in his voice that made her nod, though her eyes were guarded. Marcus took his seat, but the investor meeting was a blur. His mind was elsewhere, replaying memories of late-night talks on the roof of his old pickup truck, Lila's voice bright with ambition as they mapped out their futures under a sky full of stars. They'd been inseparable back then, two kids from a nowhere town with big dreams and bigger promises. They'd sworn to stay in touch, to lift each other up no matter where life took them. But life had a way of breaking promises. After graduation, Lila had left for college on a partial scholarship, and Marcus had thrown himself into coding, building the foundations of what would become Kane Tech. They tried to keep in touch, letters at first, then emails, but the replies grew sporadic, then stopped altogether. He'd assumed she was chasing her dreams, just like he was. He'd never imagined this. When the restaurant began to empty, Marcus lingered, nursing a glass of bourbon he hadn't touched. At 10:30, Lila emerged from the back, her apron gone, her face scrubbed clean of the polite mask she'd worn all night. She looked vulnerable, but there was a spark in her eyes, the same fire he remembered from all those years ago. Still here, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she approached his table. You always were stubborn. And you always hated waiting, he shot back, matching her smile. But it faded quickly. Lila, what happened? How are you, here? Her smile vanished, and she looked away, her fingers twisting the strap of her worn-out purse. Life happened, Marcus. Not everyone gets to be a billionaire. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He'd climbed to the top, but at what cost? He'd lost touch with the people who mattered most, including her. Tell me, he said softly. Please. She sighed, sliding into the chair across from him. It's not a fairy tale. I went to college, like we planned. Got my journalism degree. I was freelancing, chasing stories, but things fell apart. My mom got sick, cancer. I moved back home to take care of her. Bills piled up, and freelancing wasn't cutting it. After she passed, I was drowning in debt. I started waitressing to pay the bills, and, well, here I am. 10 years later, still trying to dig myself out. Marcus listened, his heart sinking with every word. He wanted to fix it, to wave a checkbook and make it all go away, but he knew Lila. She'd always been fiercely independent, proud to a fault. Why didn't you reach out? He asked. I would have helped. Her eyes flashed, a mix of anger and hurt. And what? Be your charity case. I didn't want your pity, Marcus. I still don't. It's not pity, he said, leaning forward. It's friendship. We were family once. Once, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. A lot's changed since then. They sat in silence, the weight of 2 decades pressing down on them. Finally, Marcus spoke. Let me take you to dinner. Not here. Somewhere else. Tomorrow night. We can catch up properly. She studied him, as if searching for the boy she'd known beneath the polished exterior of the man he'd become. Okay, she said at last. But don't expect me to be impressed by your fancy restaurants. He grinned, the first real smile he'd felt all night. Deal. The next evening, Marcus picked her up in a sleek black Tesla, though he'd chosen to drive himself rather than use his usual driver. Lila raised an eyebrow as she slid into the passenger seat, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the car's luxurious interior. Still showing off, huh? Old habits, he said with a wink, pulling onto the road. He took her to a small, family-owned diner on the outskirts of the city, a place that reminded him of the greasy spoon they used to haunt as teenagers. The neon sign flickered, and the jukebox played old Springsteen tunes. It was perfect. Over burgers and milkshakes, they talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Lila told him about the stories she'd written, the ones that never got published, the dreams she'd buried under the weight of responsibility. Marcus shared his own struggles, the loneliness of his success, the way every victory felt hollow without someone to share it with. They laughed over old memories, mourned lost time, and slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. I missed you, Marcus admitted, his voice raw. I didn't realize how much until last night. Lila looked down at her milkshake, stirring the straw in slow circles. I missed you too. But I didn't know how to reach out. Not after everything. You're reaching out now, he said. That's enough. As they left the diner, Marcus made a decision. He didn't tell her. He knew she'd refuse if he did, but he was going to help her, not out of pity, but because she deserved better. Because she was Lila, the girl who'd believed in him when no one else did, who'd pushed him to keep going when he wanted to give up. He'd built an empire, but what was it worth if he couldn't lift up the people who mattered? Over the next few weeks, Marcus found ways to reconnect with Lila. He invited her to casual lunches, sent her articles about journalism opportunities, and even offered to introduce her to editors he knew through his network. She resisted at first, wary of his intentions, but his persistence wore her down. Slowly, she started writing again. Small pieces at first, then bigger ones. Marcus read every word, marveling at the talent she'd kept hidden for so long. One evening, as they sat in his penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Lila turned to him, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen in years: hope. "I got a job offer," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "A real one. Investigative reporting for a national outlet." Marcus's heart swelled. "That's incredible, Lila. You did it." "No," she said, reaching for his hand. "We did it. I wouldn't have gotten here without you." He squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. "You're wrong. You were always going to get here. I just gave you a nudge." They sat in silence, the city lights glittering below, and Marcus knew this was only the beginning. Their friendship, once lost, was stronger than ever, and he'd do whatever it took to keep it that way. Months later, Lila was thriving. Her articles were making waves, exposing corruption and giving voice to the voiceless. Marcus watched from the sidelines, proud but careful not to overstep. Their friendship had settled into a comfortable rhythm: weekly dinners, late-night texts, the occasional weekend hike. But one night, as they sat in the same diner where they'd reconnected, Lila dropped a bombshell. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady but her eyes nervous. "The job's sending me overseas. An investigative series in Europe. It's a big opportunity." Marcus's heart sank, but he forced a smile. "That's amazing, Lila. You're going to kill it." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "You're not mad?" "Mad? Why would I be mad?" he asked, though the thought of her leaving again twisted something inside him. "Because last time I left, we lost each other," she said softly. "I don't want that to happen again." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "It won't. I promise. We're different now. We know what we've got." Lila smiled, but there was a sadness in it. "You're a good man, Marcus. Better than I remembered." A year later, Marcus stood at the airport, watching Lila's plane disappear into the sky. She'd promised to call, to visit, to keep him in her life. And he believed her. Because this time, it wasn't just a promise, it was a choice. A choice to hold on to the people who mattered, no matter the distance.